But to use homelessness as your scapegoat, that's beyond shameful.
Welcome back to the Marcus Williams Training Academy podcast, where we talk about all things misconduct. Today, I'm very excited. It's another episode in our series, Misconduct in Real Life, where I had the great opportunity to interview Bryan and talk about his experience with misconduct in the workplace. Now, Bryan was actually a respondent in a case. A coworker made some accusations against him. An investigation was done. He was cleared or found not responsible. And then later, Bryan was fired without cause for being homeless. Homelessness is not a protected class, but clearly in this instance, I believe it was used as an excuse to get rid of him. It's a very interesting story. Bryan went through a lot, so I look forward to sharing that with you. Before we get started, however, please subscribe, hit the notification button, tell your friends, share the podcast. It really helps. Okay, just as I always do in these series, I got a little bit of information from Bryan beforehand just to make sure that it was appropriate for the show, but I didn't get any details. I want to get those live during the interview so that you can hear my response and my reactions as we walk through what happened to Bryan. So without further delay, let's get right into the interview. All right, everyone, I'm here with Bryan, and we're going to talk about his story and his experience today dealing with some workplace issues. And so I've talked to Bryan initially. We talked very briefly. I got a very brief overview, but no details on what happened. So we're going to get into that today. So Bryan, welcome to the show. And thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
So how about we start with you just telling the audience what happened?
Well, what happened? I have been in financial management and customer experience management for most of my career. Mm-hmm. And so I had taken a position as a financial manager at a very small credit union in the Salt Lake City area. At the time, my housing situation was not stable. I was actually technically homeless and, not doing any like illegal factors. I mean, I obviously couldn't work in a banking institution if I, had a problem with, crime. It was just simply due to, high cost of living, student loans, not being married, not having a second income coming in. Right. So a lot of factors beyond my control. And so I really thought that, taking this new job would be a really good step in my career. I should have done some more research, however, into the company before even applying for him. Had I, done some more research and read some more reviews and maybe networked with a few more people, would have found it was not a good place to be. Okay. The credit union, and I will not say their name because I don't think they deserve any recognition. They are just that bad. But upon doing more research, has a very notorious reputation for toxic culture, abuse of employees, especially male employees. Okay. The credit union is predominantly women, and which I in itself have no problem with. I absolutely have no problem with that. What I do have a problem with is with any gender or race thinking that they are superior. And there was quite a bit of a very feminine or feminist approach to how things were run, that, men were inferior and women were superior. And so that instantly, led me to some issues. Within just a couple days of, starting my new position as a branch manager, I had a young female employee who defined herself as, quote, empowered. Okay. And she blatantly said to me, I don't believe I have to listen to anything a man says. And I said, well, I am your manager, and so I respect how you feel, but this is what this is what it is. Right. And so she said that she, quote, deserved a promotion because she had been promised a promotion prior to my starting there that I knew nothing about. And so I spoke with this other manager who had supposedly promised this promotion. And this manager confirmed that indeed no promotion had been promised, that this particular employee was pretty notorious throughout the organization for kind of starting trouble. Mm-hmm. But my direct supervisor, who was the vice president, a very, again, I would say a feminist lady, this girl could do no wrong in her eyes. She could probably rob the credit union and probably would have gotten a promotion for it. So I said, to this young lady, I really believe that, you are able eventually to do this position you're applying for, but I need to see some more production. I need to see some more knowledge. I need to see that you understand it before I sign off on a recommendation for it. And this girl did not like that at all. Mm-hmm. Within 24 hours, I was being accused of racism, of sexual harassment, of just a whole host of asinine accusations. Okay. And so an investigation was immediately done. My other coworkers all confirmed that no such things were ever said, that no such things were ever done. And it just kind of, I thought, went away. And this girl was eventually promoted by my direct manager without my recommendation, without my, anything. Totally broke the credit union's protocols in doing that and just promoted her, and she left. So I thought it was fine. But there was a lot of things just going, I could just tell I was actually within 2 weeks, I was looking for another place to work because it was just so toxic and so just not comfortable.
Right.
But what the bottom line is that they had found out about my housing situation. And this very mean lady, this direct supervisor of me, came into my office one day and said, "We hear that you are homeless," and proceeded to interrogate me, like literally interrogate me for about 2.5 hours with a recorded, call or with a recorder to catch me in something, but said very prejudicial statements like, homeless people are mostly drug addicts. They, do we need to lower your cash limits? Do we need to, beef up security? I mean, completely stereotypical, asinine, very inhumane statements.
Right. And
so I was very offended at these questions, and I stopped answering. I said, I don't think I should be saying anything else without a lawyer present, because this is getting ridiculous at this point. And so a couple weeks pass, despite my supposed, being a criminal because I'm homeless. This credit union gave me access to quite a bit of money. They never revoked my cash limits. They gave me access to, they were doing some kind of bogus charity drive for Christmas. They gave me access to a $5,000 credit card. So obviously those concerns weren't too, I guess they weren't validated, I guess, in their eyes. I was actively, drumming up business. I was doing my job. I was doing it very well. I actually, in less than 90 days, I closed more than $190,000 worth of new loans in line of credit, which is pretty impressive for, somebody who's just been in banking or a new position in banking for, less than 90 days. Yeah. And then just one day, about a week before Christmas, this same manager walked in and said, "We're letting you go." And I said, "Under what reasons?" And that's when this lady closed the door and said, "Officially, because of the sexual harassment claims from previously." But I then said, "I think that's BS. I want to know the real reason. Is it because of my housing situation?" And she goes, "I do have concerns, and now I'm addressing them." And that was that.
Okay.
So that led to some very dark times personally.
Right.
That led to hospitalization from a suicide attempt, alcoholism, a lot of things. So.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. I know that's a difficult story to share. If we go back to the initial investigation, you said they talked to coworkers and witnesses. Were you satisfied with how they conducted that investigation? Did you think they did
a good job there?
No, because it was done in less than 2 hours.
Okay. What would you have liked to have seen done differently?
I would like to have seen that employee terminated.
Okay.
Because, there was, again, speaking with there was a fill-in manager who was filling in until apparently I was hired. By the way, I was the only male out of 8 branches. I was the only male. And so 80, like I said, about 80% of that credit union was women, and very, feminist women. And so, again, I don't have a problem with that. I want to make that very clear.
Right.
But what I do have a problem with is any type of superiority attitude, whether it's within gender, race. I'm not down for that.
Okay.
And so, with that said, I do believe that that female employee should have been terminated, because the female manager who advised me of, this supposed promotion that this girl was supposed to get said, yeah, you need, she literally said, I'm sorry you have her. She's been nothing but a problem. And the fact that this girl not only blatantly lied, blatantly put my career and reputation on the line, accused me of illegal activity, and then got a promotion for it, is to me what's really disturbing. So I believe that if a good organization would have taken the evidence, taken the fact that this girl had problems before, and would have terminated her employment.
Okay. So I'll give some just quick input before we go on to the next section on that one. I think you have a good argument there. When they did that investigation, you're right. 2 hours isn't enough time to be thorough. It's not enough time to really do multiple interviews and talk to people. But it sounds like the outcome of what they did do was that it was a false allegation. You'd never said those things. You'd never done those things. So what I propose, or what I promote, is that instead of, because in your case, she was the complainant. She's the one that made the complaint. You were the respondent. You were responding to it. What I tell companies they should do in that case, where they have what looks like a false allegation, is open a new investigation. So that makes you now the complainant and her the respondent. So open a false report investigation.
A complaint about a false complaint. Yeah.
Right. And it sounds like it's double work a little bit, because you already know, and you can use the same evidence, right? But the thing about that is then it doesn't look like you're taking a complainant who could be a potential victim and firing her in a case where she wasn't the respondent. So it's a much cleaner situation when you open a new case, make her the respondent in the new case, and give her the same rights that they should have given you.
Agreed.
So that's what I would say about that one. So, but after that was done, did you get any kind of paperwork? Did you get any kind of finding, or was it just kind of went away?
It was an email. That's all they did was, we found that it's been a misunderstanding, and they use that very, CYA kind of language. I think you know what that stands for.
Right.
Misunderstanding, miscommunication. I'm like, maybe I was raised different. I mean, I was raised in the Deep South, but where I come from, a lie is a lie. And
right.
There's no miscommunication about it. You don't miscommunicate misinformation. So you know when you're telling a lie, and you know when you're telling the truth. So, but yeah, it was just an email that said, just basically don't even worry about it. We're not worried about it. Neither should you.
Yeah. Okay. It's also interesting that in a private conversation, they basically told you that she was a problem employee. Mm-hmm. And because I've been in that situation as a supervisor where I was told the same thing, and come to find out he had been a problem employee for years, and no one had the courage to do anything about it.
Sure.
So, and then every time they tried, he would file a complaint against someone. It was this recurring thing. And he chewed up supervisors and spit them out like nothing else, and no one was ever willing to do anything about it. So that's really frustrating, but it's telling that they would say that to you in private, but I would guess if they were confronted, I would guess that she would never admit that she said that to you.
Of course.
That would be my
guess. Of course.
Okay. So she comes to you with after she found out your housing situation. And feel free to, you don't have to go into detail, but I'm sure the listeners will be interested or curious, because there are different levels of someone who's homeless, and people often picture a homeless camp in Los Angeles or whatever. So were you in a situation like that, or couch surfing in friends' couches?
Yeah, it definitely was not, thankfully, was not like what you would typically, think of. It was more couch surfing. It was hotels when I could afford them, a couple nights sleeping in a vehicle, things like that. Most, homeless people that are kind of like how I was are very much like Chris Gardner. I don't know if you're familiar with who he is. He's the guy who the movie Pursuit of Happiness was based off of, with Will Smith. And I've watched several of his talks, and he said most homeless, the vast majority, are what he calls white collar homeless. Very educated, very professional, but are just down on their luck. And he said the vast majority do not want to go to shelters, do not want to go to government subsidized places, because they're so dangerous.
Right.
And so, which has been confirmed time and time again. One of our congressman here, well, he's no longer a congressman as of 4 days ago. He went actually undercover and stayed the night at one of Salt Lake City's notorious homeless shelters, and said, I was almost stabbed 3 times. I was almost infected with, needles. They're not safe places. And so I was never going to allow myself, to get that far down. So, but that unfortunately was the misconception. That's the only thing people see is homeless shelters running ragged with drugs, 10 cities. That's the perception. And that's what this credit union saw. And they should have known better. They absolutely should have known better, because they claim to do a lot of work with, the homeless and charity, mumbo jumbo. That's just to make themselves look good. But if they really had done all those, charity things, they would know that that's not the real case, and would have, maybe given me a little break.
Yeah. I mean, charity is easy when you're just signing a check.
Absolutely. when you don't live it and breathe it.
Right.
It's
And I mean, they had the evidence that you weren't in that situation, because you were showing up to work on time, clean, and doing your work without any kind of disciplinary issues.
Correct. I was also a notary. I'm also a notary public of the state of Utah, concealed weapons firearm holder, federally bonded. You don't get to those positions by having a criminal record.
Right. Yeah. And unfortunately, there is truth to, like you said, with the undercover congressman, there's truth to the fact that there's a major crime problem when it comes to a certain portion of the homeless population, but certainly not all and not everyone. And they knew better, because you were there every day. They saw you for 8 hours, whatever, a day. So when she came in, grilled you on the homelessness, and you finally put a stop to it and said, I think I need to talk to a lawyer, what was her response to that?
That was not necessary, that we're just having a, quote, friendly conversation, and wants to understand the situation better.
Okay. Doesn't sound so friendly.
Again, a very CYA response.
Right. And she recorded that whole conversation.
From my belief, yes, because I continually saw some type of a device that was not her phone in her hand. So while I cannot say for certain, I'm pretty confident that their lawyer said, record that call, because it is perfectly legal in Utah to record a conversation without the other person's consent.
Right. And I would give that advice to everyone, wherever you're at. Look up your state law. And whenever you are in a meeting with HR, with management, any type of meeting where you think it might go bad, hit record on your phone every single time.
Absolutely.
And they actually, especially like you said in Utah, where there's a one-party consent law for recording, they can't actually force you to stop, because you don't need their consent to do it. They can stop the meeting, but they can't stop you from recording. And so I would advise that to everyone. I don't know how many problems or issues could be solved if there was a recording. As an investigator, I record every conversation, and it was it's not just for memory purposes, it's to protect me. So
Absolutely.
Someone couldn't afterwards make an allegation that I said this or lied or pressured them or intimidated them in any way. And I've had that happen, and it's not fun. And so I started recording, and it was interesting. I would get, after I started regularly recording, my time in court went way down, because the defense attorney would listen to the recording and suddenly had nothing to grill me on.
Sure. Yeah.
And so I wasn't called to court anymore because my work stood on its own. So that's a little side note. But anyway, so then a couple weeks will go past, and then she comes in, shuts the door, and so did she actually say officially we're firing you because of the investigation or because of the harassment claims?
At first, she said, we're just letting you go. It's not working out. I said, I need more than that. I deserve more than that after everything I've done here. She goes, well, officially, the allegations that this employee made just never sat well with me, very generic answers. And that's when I said, are you firing me because of my housing situation? She goes, I do have concerns, and now I'm addressing them.
Okay, so she essentially admitted to you it was because of the housing, not because of...
That's what I really believe.
Okay. I mean, and you already had an email in writing saying, don't worry about it. The investigation's done. You're cleared. So that...
Correct. I also think that, and the reason why I want to make it very clear why I'm pointing back to this kind of feminist attitude is I think honestly, that was the scapegoat, was my housing situation, but that I was a male manager and I had come in and done more in less than 90 days than most of her female managers had done in probably 9 years. I think she didn't like that. And I think that there was just this pervasive attitude around this organization that men should, that the women should be doing this. And the fact that I came in with my drive and my passion and my ambition to do a good job has nothing to do with the fact I'm a male. That's just how I was raised.
Yeah.
So I really think there was honestly a big jealousy factor there, and just this woman did not like it. Could clearly see that I could not be trampled over and made to basically be her puppet and just use this as a scapegoat. But
yeah,
that's a pretty bad scapegoat.
Yeah. And, homelessness is not a protected class.
No.
There are some states that are starting to pass laws protecting the homeless in employment, which is awesome. Hopefully that continues, because it's a vicious circle. You can't get it is because you don't have a job, but you can't get a job because you don't have a lease. And I mean, what do you do? But gender is a protected class. So, but it's a difficult thing to prove. It's a difficult, unless there were some overt statements or actions on their part, because you're a man, that those are difficult things to prove, even if it's true. You could 100% believe that that's why, and that's true. But that type of discrimination is really hard to prove unless there's some pretty overt statements, emails, whatever, behavior.
And even then, in a more conservative legal system like Utah, because I actually went to law school, so I'm sort of familiar. Again, they could probably catch you doing it on camera, and very little would be done. It's just a very conservative, interpretation of the law here. So, but just FYI, the person that replaced me was a woman and was an employee very I would say underneath me, like not in a bad way, but experience wise, position wise, had no clue how to be a manager versus someone with 16 years of experience. That employee, I think, left within a month, the credit union, from all the pressure and from all the BS going on. So there was clearly, I think, a gender bias there. And sadly, I wish, looking back on it, this woman had just said, I don't like you because you're a man. I honestly wish that had been the case.
Yeah.
But to use homelessness as your scapegoat, that's beyond shameful to me.
Yeah. And without any other cause. I mean, the fact that
correct,
after the conversation about the homelessness, they gave you even more financial responsibility.
Correct.
That's not actually a valid concern, just like you said. And frankly, if if they liked you and wanted you to stay and they found out you're homeless, instead of that response, they would say, "Oh, how can we help? I've got a cousin who owns an apartment over a garage. I'm sure we could hook you up."
Yeah.
That's how that would have gone down, which shows to me that the homelessness probably didn't really have anything to do with it. It was an excuse.
I think that's just the reason they give, because I honestly thought that woman was coming in to say, yeah, here's maybe 6 months of rent, or here's something to help you, maybe a gift card to a grocery store or something, not you're fired for being homeless.
Right.
That's what I really thought was going to happen.
And Utah is a right to work state. So there's a lot of gray area there. You can't just fire someone without cause. You can't discriminate. There's still a lot of restrictions, but that does create a gray area. So, frankly, I know now that you've kind of you said you had a very difficult time afterwards and went through a hard period. So looking back, do you wish you still worked there, or what are your thoughts kind of from a perspective further down the road?
Great question. I wish that I worked in that position.
Okay.
Because that is what I love doing. And it was a real joy to make a difference. That's why I got into banking, was to make a difference in people's lives. And so, after the day of my termination, I contacted, because I still had my employee, number list in my jacket. And I called my former employees. I said, I can't believe what just happened. They said, Bryan, you've been the best manager we've had. You truly cared about us. You truly, you bought us coffee, and you were always commending us. We've never had that here. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I love what I do. So I wish I was in that position. Would it ever be for that company? That would be a big hell to the no. Yeah. I've worked in even just as toxic, companies since then, before I went out on my own. And the light finally came onto my head. And even though I'm not religious really anymore, a scripture came to mind. And it was when Judas sold Jesus off for 30 pieces of silver, sold his soul to the devil. Mm-hmm. And that's just what kept ringing in my mind, is you should never sell your soul for 30 pieces of silver. No matter how much money you're making, never sell your soul. Never sell your dignity and your humanity and your integrity for a couple extra bucks. So, yeah, looking back on it, in a way, I'm grateful, because it's what prompted me to write 2 best-selling books. It's what prompted me to really draw a line in the sand and say, do I end my life, or do I rebuild my life? Mm-hmm. And so in a very strange way, I'm thankful that it happened. I wouldn't wish it upon anyone, however. Right. But I really believe strongly in what Conan O'Brien said, the former host of Late Night. He said one time he was giving the commencement address at Dartmouth right after he lost the Tonight Show, and he was telling his story about how he had worked for this moment for all of his professional life, and then in just a moment it was gone. Mm-hmm. And he said he thought of himself as a complete and total failure, but he said something that really prompted me. And he said, sometimes your greatest failure can be a great catalyst for profound reinvention. And so, yeah, it's what drove me to, again, write books and start a consulting firm and hope and try to get things back on track. So yeah, it's kind of a mixed blessing there.
Oh, that's a great attitude. You mentioned the books and stuff. You want to tell us what those are so that our listeners can find them?
Yeah, I'd love to. I wrote 2 best-selling books on basically why customer service is so bad in America today and around the world. And it's because we treat our employees like garbage. And so I definitely have firsthand experience of that. You can go to my website, which is www.thecsrevolution.com. So C is in Charlie, S is in Sam. And you'll find the links there, but they're also on Amazon. The first book is called The Customer Service Revolution, 8 Principles that oh my gosh, I forgot my own title. 8 principles of why customer experience needs to improve, or oh my gosh, I can't even remember it now. How embarrassing. But it's called The Customer Service Revolution by Bryan. And the second one is called Get Your Stuff and Get Out, Why Customer Service Sucks and How We Can Make It Great Again. Okay. And, The Customer Service Revolution, 8 principles that will change the way companies think about the customer experience and the employees who work for them. There we go. Just remembered.
A long title to remember.
They're very, very long titles. So, but they sum up, in a title, what it's all about. Yeah, so I've written those. They're on Amazon, but you can go to my website and, find the links to them. I really hope everyone check them out, because I really think that we can all relate to being an employee at a bad place and being a customer at a bad place.
Yeah.
But now that you have some context as to why I wrote that, it really means a lot to me. And I hope that people will find some joy and some inspiration from them.
Great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I mean, my final thoughts and kind of my final analysis is that if you are going to do an investigation into an allegation, you need to stand by the results. You can't hope for a certain result, it not happen, and then do what you want anyway, which is essentially what happened here. They wanted a certain result. It didn't happen that way, but they went with it anyway. Do the investigation, do it right, and then stand by the finding. That's showing that you're basically showing trust in your own process when you stand by it. And I think that was the major failure point here, along with, all the other stuff that we talked about. But thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I think there was a lot here for people to think about, and a lot that they can relate to. So I really appreciate your time.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate being here.
All right. We'll talk to you later.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you for listening to my interview with Bryan. That was a lot of interesting information. It was a very interesting experience. I'd love to hear what you think about that. But most of all, I know that all of you have experienced misconduct in the workplace in one form or another. As a witness, as the victim, as the perpetrator, as the manager, as the investigator, in some form or another, you have been a party to or experienced misconduct in the workplace. I want to tell your stories. If you go to my website, williamsconsultgroup.com/podcast, there's a form you can fill out. It's your name, email address, a couple sentences on what happened, and I'd love to then talk to you to see if your story would work for our audience and for this podcast. It doesn't matter how big or small your experience was. If it's something that impacted you, it's something that I want to talk about and share, because they can impact other people as well. If you went through it, someone else probably did too, and would love to hear your story. So please share those with me. Thank you again to Bryan for sharing his story with me. Please subscribe, and I will see you next time on the Marcus Williams Training Academy podcast.